Coming up this week on the Digital Lifestyle Show 912, Gary's here and we're going to catch it up. A couple of weeks since we last talked to Gary about we've got new builds of Windows 11. We've got a Microsoft event coming up with Surface. We can talk about that. DevKit being killed, some Microsoft technology that they were leading the way, is now being killed. Gary's got some interesting devices he's found. We'll be talking about them. We've got catch up on EV news and lots more. So let's get straight to Gary. Gary, good evening.
Good evening,
and welcome back.
It's been a while
week.
Actually. So,
yeah,
week of the week before as well, I think.
Yes,
so it's a while since I've been on, but it's a good show last week. I really enjoyed that. Listening to your talk about music heritage.
Yeah, yeah, that was great. Thanks to Dr. Jez, who is a real doctor, for last week's show. I think we'll probably do another one then later in the year. But yeah, some great stuff he's got in there. And I had a look at the CS60, which he got rid of. I think they're like nearly 10 grand or something like that. Those Jupiter 8s that it's got are around 10. If you got between 10 and 20, depending on eBay or Reverb. But when you're talking about that stuff, I mean, we talked about Spectrums and BBC Micros being, keeping them going. But these vintage synths like the Jupiter 8, you're keeping that going, but it's 20 grand's worth of kit as well that you're keeping going. But that's just because, and it's just because it's rare. They're a sought after machine, aren't they? Rather than being, it's not gold plated. It's a basic. It's a beautiful synth, but it's not something. It's something that's now a collectible. But yeah, I really enjoyed doing that. I did look at some of the some of the synth prices on Reverb, and that some of the old ones are really quite expensive. So a couple of mine have actually aged quite well. The RX5 drum machine up there is we'll have to sort of think 800-900 quid. I'm sure I only paid 200 quid for it. So, but they're not investments like 10-20 grand like the Jupiters. But yeah, it was good fun talking about that. So I did enjoy that. It's great as well with someone to have the, like we talk about collecting all computers or whatever and restoring. Is that same passion is there in for synth as well? So it was good fun that. Right, so we didn't have a normal show last week, so we have got quite a few build type stuff. There's a Microsoft event I wanted to talk about. I wanted to ask you about chargers as well. So first, as a dev kit that I wanted to ask you about that's going away, and that's the Azure Connect developer kit's going. It's just a shame, isn't it?
It is a shame. I mean, the Connect was such a clever device, and the dev kit was quite useful for some fairly obscure usages. I mean, it was a nice Connect device actually for motion sensing and motion tracking. I know a few people who are using them in smart home type installations, but they're really expensive for what they are because obviously it's a dev kit. It's not a consumer type thing. But no, it's going away. They decided not to carry on making it, which is a shame. But
it's kind of the end of the line, isn't it, for the for that initial Connect that came out with the Xbox 360, wasn't it? Or was it the other one after that? Was it? I can't remember now. Yeah, I remember my kids playing with it when there were some interesting games for it where you had I remember some like River Rapid type thing that you could go through.
Yeah, I remember playing that. The only problem with the original Connect for the UK was it was designed for American houses where you had much bigger rooms, and most of our rooms weren't big enough for it. Connect 2 was a bit better, which the Connect, obviously the dev kit was based on, but equally it just didn't get the traction that he really needed. But it should have been a brilliant device, and it really had a lot going for it. And we're still using a lot of that technology. I mean, if you log in using facial recognition on your laptop, you're using technology which came from the Kinect development for the depth sensing stuff. So, it's not. I mean, it's not a waste in a lot of ways. The technology has been used for a lot of other things, but it's a typical thing of Microsoft being way ahead of the time and not knowing how to deal with being so far ahead of the time.
Yeah, because I noticed the one of the Sky offerings now, if you've got a Sky subscription, is some kind of Sky camera where you can do you can watch something with, you can watch football with, with one of your parents who in a different house at the same time, that shared experience. And I think it also said, the advert said it monitors your workouts, which is exactly what connected when that first came out. There was the health things, wasn't there, on the Xbox, that was pushing you to do all this stuff using the cameras to work out whether you were doing it properly. So that technology is now is now an optional add-on. And then of course you've got things like the Facebook camera and things like that. So you're right, it was just a piece of technology that Microsoft didn't quite know what to do with it, because like you said, it was a great technology. Even just having a camera in your living room now seems great, for Zoom meetings and Skype and Teams and everything else. But I used to use it a few times. I remember I used it with Skype with sort of family members a few times, and it was probably really good during the lockdown. But by then it had sort of died a death, hadn't it? And games didn't really take advantage. I remember one of the driving games, you could turn your head and it would turn your view. Might have been Project Cars or one of those. Anyway, so as you turned, it was tracking your head, doing head tracking using the Kinect rather than the motion sensor on a VR helmet. But it was never quite good enough to make it mainstream. It's funny. It's a bit like it's the same thing with sort of VR in general, but it's never quite caught on the mainstream. I mean, I think perhaps the room size is still an issue. I mentioned about my son's got the headset and he very rarely uses it because it's just not enough room to play on it. So maybe it's something to do with that. But it's the whole thing just never really took off, but it had so much potential.
It did, and I think that, as you say, VR is the same, mixed reality is the same. A lot of it's down to the need. If you're going to do like VR, MR, whatever, you kind of need a full body type in immersion in a small space. You almost need one of those like hamster wheel type things in 4-directional, 3D hamster wheel to be able to make it work. It's really tricky to see how you could ever get proper immersive stuff in a room, and people eventually move away from that. I mean, these things are always going to come back. It's like 3D TV. It will be back soon.
Yeah,
they all come again. But yeah, it's yes, it's gone for now.
Yeah, it's a shame. Yeah, it's a shame, but. Anyway, that's the things that's going. We have got something new coming. I spotted this was on Windows Central. Is Microsoft announced a Surface event is coming place. It's taking place next month in New York. So I wonder what that'll be. We could probably do a full speculation as we get close down, but I think it'll be new Surface devices, and there's got to be some AI in there as well, isn't there? Because of course it wouldn't be a Microsoft event or a tech event in 2023 without some AI talk about it. So I don't know how Microsoft will tie AI into Surface devices, but I'm sure it will. Cameras or Windows Hello or eye tracking or something like that. But I'm guessing we'll see a new Surface laptop studio, maybe new Surface Go. That's what I'm hoping for. I don't think you were on the show when we talked about it. I did see that the rumors of an ARM-based one have been discounted, and it looks like that is not happening this time. So I don't expect an ARM Surface Go, which is exactly what I wanted. And where Richard delivered one of his rants about the ARM dev kit. So I don't think we're going to see that. I think we're just going to see the 21st September new Surfaces coming. So this will be interesting. But I think there might be some Windows 11 type stuff. So maybe they'll talk a bit more about Windows 11, the next update to Windows 11. I'm not expecting a Windows 12 launch, but you never know, it could surprise us. But I think we'll see the new Surfaces anyway. I'm looking forward to seeing those. My Surface Go, my original one, is really past its end of life now, and there's bits of the screen that don't work and all sorts. So it's hanging on, but I really do want to replace it. So I think had there been an ARM-based one, I probably would have gone straight for that one just to see what it was like. But yeah, maybe we'll see. But anyway, it'll be interesting to see what that comes. So we can talk about that at closer time. But at least we'll get something new coming out of that soon.
I've noticed there's a few bargains on old Surface Go's actually on eBay at the moment. There's as we speak, there's 15 hours left on 4 times Surface Go without any accessories, so it's actually for 4 tablets for £47 at the moment.
Oh, that's good. Yeah,
I mean, it will go up.
3,
go 2,
go 2. Yes, no, the 3 would be the new one. Yeah, and that's actually a pretty decent device. It supports Windows 11. Just avoid the 4 gig one though.
But I think these are 4 gig ones, so that's probably why they're cheap. But it's still, I mean, it's still bargain prices.
Tablet, that's you can't. Yeah. I've got the laptop studio which I use for almost everything, but I do quite like a smaller device, so sitting on the sofa reading forums and a bit of web stuff. So I think the Surface Laptop Studio is quite big. Even when you put it into tablet mode, it's still quite a big chunky tablet. So I think a Go would be good for that. And I've always used to like it for taking to meetings as well. So I think they changed the keyboard connector though, so I might have to get a new keyboard. But yeah, I do. I really like that form factor. It kind of reminds me of the original Surface RT. It's just a little bit smaller than the RT. Similar sort of idea behind it. So hopefully I'll get something. But yeah, you're probably right. We get some good bargains at the moment. While we've not been talking builds for the last couple of weeks, we didn't do builds last week. We've had quite a number of builds in the last couple of weeks, but nothing too exciting. Although if you're on the beta channel, this is now, I think, solidifying into being a fairly good update. The last update with 22631 introduced the zip and RAR and all those extra files, 7-zip and all that. So that was announced back in May, wasn't it, at Build, and they've been in the dev channel for a while, and now they're in the beta channel, which means they'll pretty soon, I think, get to release previews. So I think this 22631 will be the build that goes as the 23H2 update. It's also got some UI changes. There's some combined taskbar and things like that, buttons. There's also the File Explorer update and things like that. So it's coming into quite a nice update. It's not a big build within with a huge 4 gig download, that kind of thing that we've had in the past. It's one of those cumulative upgrade type ones, but that is looking like a nice update. So so if you're on the beta channel, you can try these things, because I think these will be out fairly soon. If you're on the dev channel, there's been a couple of builds last week. 23526 was the most recent one last week, and there were some changes in the start menu for rich thumbnails, which is actually in the beta one as well. So this the dev build has quite a few changes and things in it, but they're kind of almost at the same time as beta. But there's been nothing major in the last couple of ones. There was also a Canary build last week as well, which would have been 25931, but there wasn't a lot of changes to that. There was just a few UI tweaks, including the thumbnail one, which was in the other two builds as well. I think they've made some improvements around under the hood. In fact, I should get the notes up for this, because I was going to ask you about this one. They've changed, or they've removed a feature. Let me find that one. So that was in 25913. Yeah, they've made a change to the security that I was going to ask you about. Probably this is this is more enterprisey Active Directory, but they're no longer using DC location for NetBIOS Wins Mailshot discovery. Microsoft had a whole post about this, but I'm guessing this is more of a the technology used in Active Directory and an older technology that's not really used anymore.
Yes, very much so. IPC and folk based lots of this stuff is ancient and vulnerable, and it's probably a lot of the way people hack into systems and some of this stuff. So yeah, good to see. In some ways, it's good to see it go. Although I'm guessing there might be some tech which actually older
Yes.
stuff which may use it.
And I think you can re-enable it. In fact, I didn't realise that it's actually you like mail slots is older than NT, back to LAN Manager DOS days.
Yeah.
NetSend. I do remember that NetSend command where you could tell people, please log off your machine or whatever you needed to do. So yeah, it is a security thing, and I think there are some ways of re-enabling it. But I think this goes to what we were saying a few weeks ago. This some of the stuff in the Canary channel is under the hood stuff rather than the sort of file manager UI type things that you kind of expect with new builds. But this is a lot more complicated and needs a lot more testing, really, isn't it? And that's why it's in Canary build. Yeah. So that's that was quite good to see. But yeah, like you said, if you know what that is, you probably know that you need it back on again.
Yes, absolutely. Most people won't notice it missing.
Yeah. There was another change in it. Actually, you can now remove the camera, Cortana, photos, people, and remote desktop apps. They can now be installed. So previously, you couldn't do that. So they've made these, I guess, a little bit lighter. So perhaps that points to maybe a more modular install process going forward in the future that might make these builds a little bit smaller, and they're just delivered via the store. Because I don't know why you couldn't get rid of. I remember the Photos one. Was it the Photos one that used to have a problem? You couldn't actually reinstall. You had to use a PowerShell to fix it. I remember that was back in the Windows 10 days. But so you can actually uninstall it completely. Which I mean, things like remote desktop. If you never use it, then I suppose you may as well get rid of it. Perhaps when we start get new builds and you do clean installs, perhaps some of this stuff won't be pre-installed as well. I suppose things like remote desktop, if you're an administrator, you want that, but if you're an admin, you know how to install it anyway. So it's not critical to have these things in there anymore. So I think that was the roundup of all the builds. I've got videos of all these as well. And the full details are on digitalifestyle.com. So there's plenty to go through on these builds. One other Windows 11 thing, I got an interesting one that I came across yesterday. With some Korg drivers. So with 22H2, and Korg only really talked about this a few weeks ago, so I don't know if it's a relatively new thing or it's just that they just published the fix for it. If you've got some Korg Bluetooth equipment, they make some controllers and little keyboards and mixers and things like that you can use Bluetooth rather than plugged in by USB, which is handy. But since 22H2 in the last certainly the last few months, they've stopped working with Windows 11. So quick fix really, but if you don't know about it, it's not easy. Is you go to Bluetooth devices, then go to devices, and you change the Bluetooth discovery to advanced from auto, and the things pop back up again as well, which is so I'm guessing that means it was some kind of labeling or something like that of the way that the devices have been. I don't know if you know on Bluetooth, is there a way you tell the OS what kind of device you have, and maybe Windows is now working on some filter for that?
Could be. I mean, there are tags on the Bluetooth standard which tell you what type of devices you are. So yeah, it could well be that.
Yeah. So I think perhaps Korg have either mislabeled or using a label that Microsoft would say, you shouldn't have been doing that. So there isn't a fix other than what I've just showed you there. So perhaps they'll update their Bluetooth drivers at some point, but I guess that's into the firmware of the digital devices. So if you buy something and you can't connect it up to your PC, you can't update the firmware. So maybe you could do it via USB or something. But anyway, there is a quick fix. It's still one of the top posts I get on the site and the videos is how to fix the Korg USB MIDI driver. So from 2019 that I did update the post as well last year as well, because still people have a lot of trouble with that. That was that 10 channel thing that you may remember me talking about, but I get comments about that all the time. So it's obviously still an issue, even though I think the Korgs say they fixed it, but there's plenty of people seeing them. So yeah. Now I've also posted. I did a little video on that one. I was posted last week a quick video of how to use the Selena to process your other synth as well, and your drums and things like that. Because I think I talked about the other week, the Selena has got this brilliant modulation feature built into it. It sounds really nice, and it gives you that real 70s sound. And I've been putting all sorts of stuff through it. So my DX7 and my drum machines and everything else. So I've got a video on how to do that in case anybody's wondering. But it's a lovely sound. So I've checked that out if you've got one of those Selenas. I must admit, I'm really enjoying it. It is very tempting to put it on every track that I do now. And I have done that in the last few tracks, but I've been combining that with the vocoder as well, actually. So I've got a couple of tracks I'm working on that've got the Selena and some vocoder, so they sound very late 70s, early 80s. But it's such a evocative sound. When I play it, you hear these things. So it's an interesting instrument, and I think I talked about it a few weeks ago. But interesting idea to take a piece of vintage tech that is very unique, not available anymore, and just recreate it wholesale. And Behringer have been doing that with lots of stuff. And like I mentioned, within the synth community, there's different viewpoints on, are they infringing on intellectual property? But then, say the Selena, the company that made it doesn't exist anymore. No one was making new ones. They do make some stuff which is a bit more recent and is a bit more dubious, but in this case, it's great. It's a synth that does one thing, and it does it really well. So it's quite an interesting thing to play with. So I'm enjoying that. But after talking to Jez last week, I was on eBay looking at old synths, and I think, I could just get one more. Maybe I could just fit one more in somewhere. So very tempting. But it was interesting debate as well on the difference between a collector and an enthusiast. In fact, on some of the forums, when I put collector, it upset a few people. So, we're not collectors. A collector just has them for the sake of it. We're enthusiasts. We're musicians. We use them. There is a fine line. I suppose if you've got a 20 grand 1980s synth, does that make you a collector or an enthusiast? I don't know. It's but I think that the consensus I kind of seen was that if you just have them for the sake of it, then you're a collector. And what Jez was saying, there was some that he no longer had any use for. So despite it being sentimental and a nice piece of equipment, he didn't have a use for it. It's gone, and he bought something else. So I suppose that's the difference. I find it harder to part with stuff, I must admit.
Yep.
And some of the stuff I have sold, like my Roland JX3P, 20 years ago, I regret it now because now it's worth. Well, I probably sold it for 400 quid, and now it's worth, say, 1,000 or something like that. So it's not a huge monetary. It's just the fact I had a mint one that I've sold, and now you look on eBay and they're not quite as mint. But I didn't have much use for it at the time, so it was probably the right thing to do. But so
it's always tricky, isn't it? It's. I was digging out. I was clearing out some stuff the other day, and I found a box which I completely forgot about. It was one of the ones I used to have when I was doing events. And I just opened up, and there's 10 compact iPaqs in there, various ages. So I might have to get hold of the Centre of Computer History and say, do you want an iPaq this collection? Because it's every one under the sky. It's even got things like the fold-out. Remember the fold-out keyboards and stuff for them?
Yeah. I don't think I've got it on the shelf there. I think it's upstairs at the moment. But it's in my loft. I've got I had two. I think I had the square one. Well, that was a Casio one, actually. The compact. I had this. It was a really curved one, wasn't it? With it had a pack on that you could put a e-card with the CE cards,
Yeah.
memory
Yeah.
cards. Yeah, and a modem. You could put a modem in there on the back of it as well. They had like jackets, didn't they? That was it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they're really cool actually because they're Bluetooth, I believe. And anyway, so they probably still use them for something. To work out how. The ones I had anyway.
They were great, weren't they? They were the I can. Yeah, I'm just having a look on.
Yeah.
Share my. This is the one. I think this is the one I've got. So here's one on eBay.
Yeah.
It's £300. There you go. Well, that's unopened, never used.
Yeah, the box done new open's always going to go for a bit more money than a.
Mine didn't have that black bit on the top. I think I had an older one.
I'm actually surprised how much they're going for on eBay. Maybe they won't go to the centre computer history.
Yeah, Gary's now thinking.
Yeah.
They were nice devices. I think that probably looks like one. They were a bit ahead of the time, weren't they?
Yeah.
And it was Windows CE, wasn't it? It was Windows CE, but also the first one I got was a Palm-based PC. I think that might have been the Casio one, and then they fell out, or they got legal action, didn't they, from Palm? Yeah. So they changed it to Pocket PC.
Which I must admit, I always thought was a great name. I think Pocket PC. Yeah. That's a shame that name went away because it was such a good name.
Yeah. I mean, it's exactly what this is, isn't it? I mean, I've got my Surface Duo. It's a Pocket PC. It does most of the things you can do with a PC, and it fits in your pocket. And that's exactly what that vision was, wasn't it, for the compact iPaq at the time? It was pre-internet on the device, wasn't it? So you had a really nice. I've still got the cradle somewhere. A nice cradle.
I've got loads of cradles for them. I found tons of cradles and barcode scanners as well. I've got loads of barcode scanners.
Okay, that's the one I've got. I think something like
that. Yeah,
I've
got one of those. Definitely got one of those somewhere in there. I've got basically different varieties. There's one sort of a lot of them in there.
Yeah. So the idea of that, of course, if anybody's not seen that, so data on your device like you get now, the only way to get your appointments and your notes and everything on the device was to dock it, wasn't it? So you used to you take it with you, you come back to your desk, you dock it, it would sync your calendar back up again and your contacts and everything. It was brilliant.
But those are the days when you used to run events for data collection. And the only way for the people to get their data off was to actually come and sync them. And you used to have hundreds of docking stations set up for people to come and sync them and get them onto the computer and then process it.
Yeah. Yeah, they were really good. They had IR on them as well, didn't they? So you could actually. Yeah. I used to use it with my Nokia to get WAP data.
Oh, those were the days.
Yeah, I actually wrote a podcast receiver for the iPad because you could use. It was Visual Basic CE, wasn't it? That I had. Yeah, it was a nice. I actually wrote a few applications for that. I used some at work for a bit stock taking and things like that were quite good as well. So yeah, really nice devices. Ahead again, almost like Microsoft were ahead of the time. If you think if that had evolved, they kept those going, evolved them, with the modern standards over time. That you could be, instead of having an iPhone, you could be having an iPaq in your pocket.
Yeah. I think they made some mistakes along the way, as Microsoft usually do when they're ahead of the game.
Yeah,
so quite know why that is the case, but they definitely did. I mean, it's interesting. What was the other thing I found? I don't know if I can find a picture. Do you remember the Vardim?
The Vardim.
VADEM. It was a.
No.
Let's see if I can find a link. It's basically one of the first foldable type laptops, Vardim Clio. I'll just paste a link to it. So it's. There's a link in the chat so you can bring it up on screen. But yeah.
Oh, yes.
Windows CE laptop.
Oh yes, that looks cool. Now I don't remember that at all.
Yeah,
But I do remember the CE laptops, but yeah,
one of the first convertibles, effectively. So you can flip it in all directions, and a really nice mechanism. It worked really, really, really well. And I actually found that as well when I was clearing out, and it still works. It's amazing. It still works. Can't do a lot on it, but it was quite something.
and of course, I mean, and that's where we took these are Windows CE, which then became Windows Mobile eventually. Yeah. So the Lumias, the Lumias ran right up to the Windows Mobile 6.5, was it 6.6? 6.5 was the last one, wasn't it? That so I don't know the Lumias ever ran that, but certainly it's the I had HPs and the Trios ran it, didn't they? And yeah, it just the iPhone really just was such a big change that Windows Mobile never caught up, did it? But yeah, they were quite good. That was probably around the time when what was there was a Toshiba full Windows one, wasn't there?
Yeah, Libretto.
Libretto, that was it. Yeah, that was around that same time as well. So when the idea of having a small computer you could take around with you was amazing, because before then, even the Toshiba laptop that I had at that time, it was a big chunky thing with a big screen and big power supply and everything else, and these were what I wanted. And then you got to UMPCs, and it all carried on that, didn't it? Really, all that was right up to the sort of a Surface Go. Really, is that that idea of a small device that you can carry around with you. Oh yeah, well, you'll have to get some of these working so you can do as a show and tell on.
I'd like to get the Clio working. I've got to find the right power adapter for it, because I hope that's the one thing I haven't got. I mean, what absolutely amazed me was the battery still had a little bit of life in it when I turned it on. So obviously, often had a really good, really, really good battery life on it. But yeah, it was good. It was. It worked. I mean, it was, and it ran Paragraph. Do you remember Paragraph, the handwriting recognition?
No, I don't.
It was the same handwriting recognition which was used in the Apple Newton.
Well, I do remember, because my Newton's up there.
yeah. I found a load of those while I was doing it, and also the other thing I found was all my original paperwork for UK Newt when I was running the UK Newton club. So that one I think we'll definitely have to go to Centre Computer History.
Yeah.
But you're right.
Yeah, the Newton. I mean, I love my Newton. I had the Newton obviously before the Windows CE. That I did use that all the time. I know I've talked about that on the show in the past, and that I used that for all my meeting notes and appointments and things like that. It was just a bit too big to be pocket, but you could carry it around with you, especially if you went to a meeting and you look cool with your new. And it did look Star Trek like, didn't it, at that time? And when you're talking, probably, when was it, 93, something like that, when I was using mine, 94, before all these Microsoft ones, and before Palm. What was the first Palms called? They were just Palms, weren't they? But, yeah,
Palms.
Yeah. So yeah, the Newton was such a brilliant device, and yeah, you should definitely. My Newton still works. You get the right power supply.
Actually, I guess the first Palms were technically Palm Pilots, weren't they?
Palm Pilots. That's the one I was thinking of. Yes. Yeah. I do love all those devices. It's almost the same thing as the music tech, isn't it? There's a bit of nostalgia for them as well. But at that time it was just this is the future. We're going to have these portable computer things, and I remember people used to say to me, "You'll never replace my Filofax."
Yeah.
And of course, people don't really use Filofaxes so much anymore, but it's all in here. But that's exactly what I was using my Newton to replace the Filofax, and my Palm Pilot, and my Clio, all the way up to all the way up to these devices. Yeah, good. Yeah, I love those. Yeah, I think we need a show and tell on those.
I'll see if I can get the volume up and running for next week. I just need to find the right power supply, and I probably have got one lying around somewhere.
This is the problem. I've got in the loft a box of power supplies that I'm not quite sure exactly what we might. So when I cleared the loft out, I did get rid of some old laptops and tried to get rid of the power supply at the same time. But there was a few power supplies I had left over, and I thought, I'm sure this is going to be the one that I need for something. So I've kept a few of them. So my Vio one is probably the one that's up there somewhere. That little pop computer, the Vio one. You mentioned batteries are on there. I want to go completely up to date now and check with you on what's happening on EV chargers and batteries. We haven't spoken about that in the last few weeks.
Yeah, so there's been a flurry of new charging hubs being installed, actually. I mean, if we just take Osprey, for example, in the last just over a month and a couple of days, they've installed 4 new charging hubs. So, and these are all using the Kempower chargers, which is a really nice looking charger. It's got a and one of the clever things about Kempower charger is it does really good load sharing. So they can get away with a smaller power supply to the actual location, but share it between people. So if someone's turned up and they're draining a lot of power, then they get it straight away. Other people may be in the latter part of their charge cycle. So as we've spoken about before, that's like a theatre falling up. So it takes longer to get to the seats. So it's the battery takes a bit longer to charge as you get to near the end. So they can sort of share that profile across the power they've got across the car. So everybody gets sort of like the charge they want. And these are sort of like chargers that they way back they would have put just one charger or 2 chargers in at something like a pub. And the one example that you got there, the Gamston Lock one in Nottingham, I mean that would definitely have only been a single charge because the amount of power you could get to it, and it would have been a 50 kilowatt, or single 2 chargers, 2 50 kilowatt chargers. And because they would have to allow for the peak of those chargers, the power for them would have been quite substantial. Whereas they can actually run 6 chargers on the same power input and do the sharing, and they're just really nice. I love the look of those chargers as well. I mean, there's a big box over in the background which has got the actual charger hub, the main bits in it. These are sort of just like outlets, but they're nice little sort of. They remind me of 1950s petrol filling stations. That sort of look. They've got a little bit of look to them, but they're really clever as well. They've got. So I mean, most cars these days, most EVs these days have got a remote app, and you can still monitor your charging. But if you haven't, the actual charger has a remote app associated with it, which you can scan a QR code and just takes you to the web page, which is the web page for that charger, so you can monitor how your charging's going while you're in the pub having a meal, perhaps. And they're really sort of just nice to see them. And that's the one of 4 of these sort of size of hubs they've done recently. So that one, which is the Nottingham, they've also added one at a garden centre for the first time. British Garden Centres are partnering with them. So this is in the Newton Regis Garden Centre in Tamworth and the Wolseley Bridge Garden Centre in Stafford. They've got there. So again, these are the same types of charges as they've got at the one at Nottingham. Actually, no, I actually said that they're not at the British Garden Centre. They're the bigger chargers because they're the tritium ones, because they couldn't put the big box in, so there's less chargers at those ones, but they're 75 kilowatt chargers. And then they've got 2 more hubs. One at, we can find this because I've just lost it, at the Bakehouse pub in Welwyn Garden City, which again is a similar setup as the Gamston Walk. Not quite the same layout because they had less parking spaces, but they share two. They have 2 chargers between 2 parking spaces, basically to allow for charging either side. And then the final one is this one I think is really useful, knowing where it is in Rossendale in Lancashire, the Hey Retail Park. They've added some chargers there. And these are free. They can deliver up to 300 kilowatts, again using the same technologies we talked about. And and just it's really nice to see that they're turning not to put just a single charger in now. They're putting these little hubs in, and they work really well, very reliable. And this is what we need. We need more. But what we really need is this sort of technology at the services, because the problem with the services we've got is a lack of power coming in. So being able to share the power coming into a services would make life so much easier for the people at the services. I mean, you've only got to look at, say, somewhere like Leicester Forest East, where they had to turn the chargers off because they kept tripping the power for the actual services. And we've talked about this. The way getting your permissions to get your power in and everything else is a real challenge. But if you could somehow not have to have that quite peak level of power, you could share it out over multiple charges. That would work better. The other thing which really needs to go in more the services is battery storage. There's no reason why we shouldn't charge massive batteries overnight, because there's a lot less traffic to services overnight, and then charge them like that basis.
I see. So rather than relying on just the power coming, you can also have batteries charged, ready to charge cars. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. So it's really quite interesting to see this coming on. And I mean, I chose Osprey there because I have a good relationship with them, and they're really nice people. But a lot of the other charging companies have been doing similar things. There's a lot of expansion going on at the moment in the charging world. Instavolt have installed 4 new chargers with me in the last couple of weeks. They just keep popping up. And there's another charging company, Eggview, who just seem to be putting charges in it everywhere as well. And it's just there's a lot of land grabbers we've mentioned before for chargers. I'm not sure it's necessarily the right approach in a lot of cases to have these fast chargers. I'd like to see some more destination chargers around, but we are starting to see this. The other interesting one is Sainsbury's have now created their own charging network, and they're using the same technology as Osprey, using the Kempower chargers. So again, they can have quite a lot of chargers at a location, but they are doing a mix of fast chargers and destination chargers. The sort of chargers. But I guess fast chargers for shopping makes sense because you don't tend to spend hours in a shopping centre. You spend a half an hour maybe. Whereas pubs maybe slower charging makes more sense. You might spend
shopping centres, you bit more time and that kind of thing. Yeah.
But what is interesting, you've got places like Cambridge now putting out of town charging hubs, which you then park your car up on the charger and get your shuttle bus into town. Sort of your park and ride type thing, but park and ride with charging, which kind of makes some sense. Some interesting stuff going on in the charging world at the moment. Still a lot of progress to be made. I mean, the big thing, and I think we did mention this, is the new regulations which are coming into force very shortly, which talk about reliability of the chargers, and they've got to be up for 99% of the time, which most of them definitely aren't at the moment. It'll be interesting to see if that's actually feasible to achieve by some of the charger manufacturers, because a lot of the issues are down to how they cope with the weather. A lot of chargers stop working off this range, for example, and a lot of that is often down to the payment terminals. And there aren't really alternatives to the payment terminals that most of these chargers use. So it'd be very interesting to see how easy it is for them to keep them maintained. But we definitely need that. There's definitely been a real problem with reliability of the older chargers, the ones which were installed some time ago.
Yeah. It's I think that's one of the things that we need to have maintained, isn't it? Because if you turn up somewhere and there isn't there's a broken charger, that's almost worse, isn't it? Especially if you've planned your route to go to it. It's better than broken is worse than no charging. Yeah. The Ospreys. When you get an EV now, do you tend to decide which charging infrastructure provider you're going to use, or is it just where the location is? Is it based on price? Do you have a preference? As a new user, what would you do?
That's interesting. It actually depends who your cars come from. So, for example, with my Kia, right, I get a Kia EV charge card, and And one of the benefits I got for that for the first year was cheap Ionity charging. So I was tending to go to Ionity chargers because although they're really fast and show off the benefit of my 800-volt system for charging, they're also really expensive normally. But the discount on the card made them worthwhile going to. But most people would tend to just go for the cheapest option because they all take contactless now. It's very easy to pay on most of them. Well, I say they all take contactless. I honestly don't as of yet, but there's definitely there's a lot of difference in pricing now. So there is a bit of a price competition going on, and hopefully that will start driving the price down, because it should do, because the prices haven't really dropped since the peak of the electric price problems, and the pricing. Supply costs of electricity have gone down, so you'd kind of expect it there to be an improvement, which hasn't really happened. So we do need some competition. I mean, one of the other things the regulation talked about is clear pricing and showing price and actually publishing prices clearly, which isn't the case at the moment. So it's actually planned, as Richard mentioned, planning to a location. So you plan your journey and work out where you're going to stop. And you don't actually have price competitions because at the moment there's been so few charges out there on certain journeys that you only stop at the ones you stop at, and you're going to use the ones you got. I mean, there are certain networks I avoid. I tend to avoid GD Point because I found them very unreliable in the past. And they used to be particularly expensive. They're not, I mean, relatively, they're the same sort of price nowadays. And they're improving their infrastructure and they're to replace it. So that may be somewhere I start using again. Avoid them up now. But yeah, so yeah, it's an interesting question because it's not something I tend to think about. I tend to go wherever I can stop for a charge. But I rarely charge on the road nowadays because of having the extra bit of range. And it's amazing how much 30 miles of range difference makes from my previous car. I mean, having consistently 230, 250 miles of range gets you most places in the UK in one go, and then you think about charging when you get there. Potentially, I mean, trips I used to always charge on, I don't charge on now. I quite often do a round trip into Norfolk and come back without ever charging. So it's definitely a different. It's couple of years, there's a move on battery technology, and we're starting to see some newish battery technology coming in, which looks really impressive, with faster charging capabilities. There's always been a trade-off between faster charging and capacity up to now, but these are sort of have higher capacity and can charge faster. It'd be interesting to see them coming into fruition, but we're seeing what they call hybrid solid state batteries appearing, which are so solid state are brilliant. The concept of a battery which doesn't form dendrites, doesn't overheat because of that, doesn't have the problems with fires, and can be fast charged and has much better capacity. The problem is that building them at any scale is very challenging, which is why nobody's actually achieved that yet. I mean, we'll start seeing solid state batteries for phones very, very shortly, and they will really fast charge and have much higher capacity than the batteries we've currently got. But the idea of hybrid solid state is basically you mix a liquid battery and a solid state battery, and you get the best of both worlds. You may have slightly less capacity, but you get the fast charging, and you don't have the overheating issues and fire issues potentially with them. So, and I should emphasise that car battery fires are far few and far between. Far more petrol and diesel cars explode and go and catch on fire than any battery stick cars do, because they built so much safety equipment into these battery electric vehicles because of the risks around them. But yeah, so these solid state hybrid batteries, and we are starting to see them already, will charge probably 4 or 5 times faster than they currently charge to get to the same sort of rate. Can be lighter, can be smaller, but are more dense in terms of the amount of power they store, which has some interesting possibilities as well. It means you could actually have a lighter battery going the same range as we currently have, which means a lighter battery means actually we'll probably go further because lighter the car doesn't have as much weight. And that might actually have some trade-offs as well in cost and price and all sorts of things. The other thing is that if you do decide to build the batteries the same size as they currently are, they'll go a lot further. So 600-mile range cars might be possible. I mean, I really don't see the point in a 600-mile car range. I know that's what some diesels and things can go, and people don't think, well, if I can do that far, not charging, it's a good idea. But I mean, most places in the UK can be reached in 300 miles. So why would you need that? And especially if you're charging, if you had a car which could do 230 miles range and could fully charge in about 15 minutes, that's probably reasonably acceptable. Absolutely. There's a lot of things happening, and we will see this development rapidly, I think, in new battery technology in the next year or so. Which I think is partly why EV prices, second-hand EV prices, have started to plummet quite a bit. Two reasons really. One is that we've got a lot of ex-lease cars coming onto the market for the first time. The business cars from 4 years ago are all hitting the market now, which means you can pick up some real bargains and some really nice cars out there. There's a lot. My iPace I should drive. The equivalent of my iPace is ridiculously cheap now. What you can get, but if you really want to go to Holden and have a really nice car, Porsche's EV is available. The Taycan is available for so similar price to you could pay for a family saloon lease. So a few years on. And interesting now that the corporates are realizing that EVs are very reliable and have a long life, and there's now actually quite a few providers providing second-hand EVs on business leases and contract hire, which never happened before with other vehicles. Certainly, you never saw second life vehicles on contract hire. You do with EVs. So there's some interesting possibilities out there for people who maybe next company car may not actually be a brand new car, maybe a second hand or second life one, but equally a very high performant, nice EV, lots of features and stuff like that. So I think there's a lot happening in the market at the moment.
Yeah, it sounds it. Well, we'll hopefully we'll catch up with Richard next week about how I think he had a better trip on his last one. So
he said his Norfolk trip went well because he planned it. So
which is exactly
and that's fine. I do argue to some extent that people shouldn't have to plan. I think we've got hundreds of years of driving cars without having to plan quite as badly as that. Although in the early years of petrol cars, you had to plan because there weren't that many petrol stations around.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, we'll catch up with Richard next week then. So where's the best place to follow you? Everything's scattered now.
Everywhere, X, Threads, whatever things they're called, H2. I think I'm on every social media platform at Garry WMA.
Yeah, well, that's the best place. And mine are all on inslife.com. There's a link at the top with all the bits on it. I still haven't got used to posting on Threads, so I still find that I haven't built it into my workflow yet. So there's still some stuff on X, which I still find weird. It's still Twitter to me. TweetDeck's gone now, though, hasn't it? So unless you pay, and I didn't like the new version anyway, so I'm not paying for that. So I've kind of lost another bit of my Twitter usefulness. It's gone now, which is a shame. Right, well, we'll be back same time, same place next week. You can email me at inslife.com. That keeps the same. We'll see you next week.
Take care.